Do we have some sort of an introduction that we want to make?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah, I gotta
And
go
you,
for it.
and you are.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. I'm Richard Waine, and with me as always is my buddy Mike Miville. Say hi,
Hey,
Mike.
how's it going?
Today we have a very special guest. You know him, you love him. We have the one and only Jeff Rojas. Jeff?
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you guys.
It's good to see you too, buddy. Thanks so much. I understand that these are challenging times for people, so we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
I'm busy hermiting just like everyone else.
Well, as you know, and we've had conversations before, that this entire series was born out of complete and utter boredom due to the quarantine. So, you know, we're just trying to make ends meet here like everybody else.
Fair enough. It's good. Good place to be. I like
it. Is. I know that you have tons of meetings today, as you've probably already told me. Yeah.
My meetings were this morning from 6 a.m. forward. So you have my unrelinquishing attention at this point. So
fantastic.
Early riser, huh? Early riser. That's what we like.
Well, the early bird catches the worm, doesn't it, Jeff?
Trying to.
I am sorry. I am sipping coffee. This is only number 4 for the day, so
I haven't had coffee all day. You know what? That's a good reminder. After this is done, I'm definitely having a giant glass or a cup of coffee.
Fantastic. Well, no better substance than Go Juice. Jeff, I'd like to dive in with you a little bit. Can you tell everybody a little bit more about your history? How did you get into photography? Where did you come from?
That's a good question. I come from a corporate background. Art to me was one of those things that you did for fun, not necessarily something that you did for income. I think coming from truly an immigrant family, or second generation, so my grandparents being immigrants from a different place, effectively, they never looked at art as a realistic job opportunity. So my parents, my uncles, were creative, but didn't know how to put that context into earning a living. So I never looked at that as a viable opportunity. So I chose the safe route, quote unquote, and decided to jump into corporate America and moved to New York City when I was 18 years, or back to New York City when I was 18 years old, and climbed up the corporate ladder. Was an account manager for a data recovery company, was a recruiter for a temp staffing agency, was an executive assistant for a private equity company, was a regional sales manager for an education company. And then I lost my job and decided to take photography, and what was photography at that time, and turned it into a viable business, because I had about 3 months severance at that point, and I had been starting to date somebody who had just been building her business, and I saw all the opportunity there for her to grow that business, and realized photography wasn't just a creative outlet, but it could be turned into a service-based business. And expanding her business and helping her grow led me into growing my business and my brand and building what I wanted to do. And it's evolved from taking portraits of people now to shooting commercial work. And it's definitely evolved from doing video to photo, back to video. And it's this just evolution of creativity. But going back to the roots of, I provide a service for businesses, and I provide a solution to problems, and knowing that. So that whole realm and getting a chance to artistically try new things and experiment creatively, but realizing that the foundation for my experience has been on the business side. So that's kind of everything it is until 2020. I picked up my first camera 10 years ago this year. So 10 years of shooting. It's been fun.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah. Quick question. Have you always been creative? Or is that something that was kind of new to you when you stepped into it?
It's a really good question. So all of my life, I've putting pen to paper or chalk to paper, if you want to call it that. So I've always been drawing. It was my way of escapism, not necessarily a way to have a creative voice. So definitely ways of me, like if I was just in a mood and I just wanted to be away from everyone, I just take a pen, a piece of paper, and just start doodling, right? I was in AP Art 2D in high school. I didn't really take it seriously. In fact, I didn't even finish my presentation or my portfolio until the second to last day they were due at the end of the year. So I had failed the entire class until the end. That's how like not seriously I took creativity. But I've been creative, just not seriously until the last, I would say, 10 years. So
that's fantastic. I guess my next question here would be, you had to start somewhere and you had to learn how to be a professional photographer, because that's what you are today, are you not?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's define professional. I earned an income, and if I needed to replace any other income that I have, I could earn a living as a photographer. And I say that because I've had debates with folks on what a professional photographer is. So professional meaning you earn an income from photography. Yes, that is something that I do.
So
definition, yeah.
Well, that is a good definition.
Wow. This is not to throw shade, but if I hear somebody on YouTube again say I'm a professional photographer, they don't have a single client, it freaks me the fuck out. And I have more people that I know that don't have a single client saying that I want to go ahead and admit. And look, and this is being very frank, and I'm putting everything on the table here. I'm a consultant at a large software company on top of running my business. But if I lost my job, I could supplement everything on photography and be okay, right? So I have been a professional photographer and have made my living just on professional photography. But again, if I hear one more person just say I'm a professional photographer and they don't have a single client, I'm going to lose my mind. So.
Well, tell us how you really feel, Jeff. So I guess where I'm going with this is, when you picked up a camera, it was for artistic expression, but did you have a mentor? How did you go about learning?
Those are some really good questions. So I picked up a camera originally, not even to photograph people. I was documenting a car I was restoring with my grandfather, and it was to show off the progress of what that looked like from beginning to end. And in doing so, my attention went from the car to the photography, because it reminded me of being a kid and taking photos, because I jumped into things like Photoshop and then, enhancing those photos and what that would look like. That love went there. So then I took some lighting classes off of Meetup and went to some Meetup classes. I met a couple folks that way, and those connections would expand to learning about camera stores. And then I started going to Unique Photo out in Fairfield, New Jersey, for my first couple classes, which was interesting to say the least. So I started studying, let's say, Lou Freeman's Playboy lighting and a couple different folks. And instead of taking the workshops, because at the time I couldn't afford to pay for the $300 class or whatever it was for that specific assignment. So what I would do is I would be the assistant. So I would be the grip all day. I would move the gear and move the lighting and things like that. But I felt like that I learned more than just standing there taking photos of a pretty girl, right? So I did that probably for about a year, and helped people like Matthew Jordan Smith, help people like Lou Freeman, help just all these different people that would come through the door. And it helped me understand what a real photographer was supposed to be. And then it helped me understand the lighting aspect, the creative aspect, what really went into that. And then I started dating somebody who was a photographer and helped build her business in a way that was successful. So lots of hands-on work over the last couple of years. So I would say within the last 8 years is pretty much when I've taken this seriously.
So you would probably say that experience was your teacher more than any one particular person.
Yeah, and this sounds terrible to say, but I don't count on people. I don't necessarily trust people, right? I think people generally have something, and I think this is coming from being an only child, but I don't depend on people. I don't. It's just who I am. So I felt like me investing my time into someone that could potentially, leave or find competition. Like, the only person that I would say was a mentor towards me, the second I went from being the person that was the mentee or the person that was being mentored to somebody that was potentially a competitor, I realized really quickly how that person felt in terms of competition. It really changed the dynamic of our relationship together. And that was my ex-girlfriend, and it really bumped heads at one point. So I realized mentorship was great, but piecemeal mentorship was better than one specific person, because at the end of the day, like, one specific person doesn't have all the answers, but if you can aggregate different information from different people and then make a consolidated decision based on that information, then you have a ton of references to make a educated decision. So it's kind of how I've run my career at that point.
You literally wrote the book on photographing men. Is that correct?
I did, and photographing women. And that's been an interesting, all of that is marketing at the end of the day. You look for what's open in the market and you just go for it. Like, all that's just, it's a business card.
So how did that come about? How did you end up with writing the book on photographing men? And then I think the book on photographing women came after the photographing men, correct?
It did. And so I wanted to teach. It was something that I enjoyed doing. It wasn't something that I felt compelled to do, but I always found myself sitting, like, when you and I have conversations, I'll sit afterwards, and I thoroughly enjoy being able to be a part of your growth, right? So even if, and this being very honest and very forward, like, if I don't want anything from you at the end of the day, but I know, like, my legacy is if I help you do well and you do really, really well, I had some part in that. And that's my selfish side. Like, that's the part while you did all the work, I was part of that process somewhere, right? So I had some stone in this giant, like, foundation of success. So that's where I find things. So teaching for me was that. And what I realized with teaching is you have all these different people with different niches, right? You have people that shoot headshots. You have people that shoot fashion. You have people that shoot, primarily women. You have people that shoot boudoir. Everyone had their niche. And what I realized is men didn't really have a voice in the community. The book that I picked up prior to mine that was posing men really had, like, karate poses in it. And the last time I looked at, like, GQ or Esquire, I haven't seen a single karate pose on any one of those covers. Right? I was like, no one's taking this seriously. Everyone thought it was a joke. I mean, look, think of, like, boudoir versus doudoir. It's the joke behind it, right? But at the end of the day, no one's looking at that as a viable solution. So I saw this really interesting niche in the market and just went after it. And to be clear, I mean, before that, I was teaching video, and not many people remember that, but I evolved that into doing something differently, and then did photographing men and used that as a catalyst for being able to have a voice in this industry, and then kind of built up from there. And then my family's primarily made up of women, so they were like, hey, where's our book? And I was like, screw it, I'll just write one for you guys. And that's so that was that.
So just real quick, do you teach, like, and give, like, actual, like, lessons as well, or are you just looking to teach with, like, a book and writing? I've done some teaching myself. I've taught at college level, high school level. I've considered books, but I'm not a writer, so that whole thing, like, is just boggles my mind how somebody can start writing a book. So do you do other things like classes and workshops as well, or were you just looking to, like, teach through, like, Word? Do you do, like, just books and stuff? Are you looking to do more books?
Great question. So let's start off with the book question first. So writing a book isn't inherently easy. If you think about it from the grand scheme of things, it's very, very difficult. But what I found was if I broke down the book into chapters and subsections, they were still piecemeal material that I could use in classes and lectures that I was teaching. Those specific synopsis of, like, little snippets of information, smaller chunks, and then repurpose that into larger portions. So as an example, and on a business side, to give this to you guys as well, I put out a PDF for posing men long before that I ever did a book on writing about photographing men, right? But I still used all the photos and sold the PDF to people learning how to pose men and included that in the book. So it was a lot of different pieces of research and things that I had been putting together, aggregated into one specific place, right? And allowing me to teach classes simultaneously at the same time I was writing helped me better put the curriculum together for the classes, as well as put the curriculum together for the book. So it kind of all meshed in itself. It's not like a chicken and the egg thing. It's how can I maximize my time and be as productive as I can, given the fact that I want to do all these different things and put it into one place. And the book was my synopsis of all the research and all the classes that I was doing at the time. And to your point, I mean, look, at this point in my career, I've taught in front of tens of thousands of people on platforms like Creative Live. I've taught in front of hundreds of people at like places like WPPI and PPE and Shutterfest as an example. I've taught in front of 5 people at different lectures. I've taught in front of a group of 2 people at times. Like it really, for me, it's the presence of being able to give someone information for them to go back and do something with. So I found online classes, in-person classes, blogs. I've written for Entrepreneur Magazine. I've done Fox News. I've done a ton of different, if you Googled my name, all these different piecemeal things, but it all comes back to creative entrepreneurship at the end of the day. So
good.
To put things in some context, Jeff and I actually met at Photo Plus Expo in New York City, God knows how many years ago. And every year we just reconnect at the same place, almost at the same time. In some cases, we've had dinner together, and we always enjoy these types of conversations. But it's so rare that we ever get this kind of very candid view into how he perceives things and his photographic life. So I want to dive a little bit deeper, if you don't mind, Jeff.
mind at all.
You've written a book on photographing men and women. You're a very successful photographer and businessman. Where do you find the inspiration, both for your images and for the creativity that goes into your other work?
Outside in is definitely something I want to go ahead and acknowledge. I don't, I love all of you guys and I love my peers, but if I focused on that, I would have no personal growth because I think you're limited by the people that are around you. So I tend to look outside in. So I look at the greats, and when I say that, I say Mark Seliger, Anil Leibowitz. Look, I have somewhere back there, Peter Lindbergh. I have a couple books that I look at in terms of references for creativity. Those things make me happy. And those are things that I try to work up to every single day. So creatively, that's my inspiration. In terms of the business side of things, again, outside in, looking at it from like situations like we're in with COVID. How does that affect businesses? Not from a creative standpoint, but how does that affect larger businesses? So I start studying how other businesses are operating, how they're growing, how they're building their business, what are they doing to strategize, and then figure out ways that we could potentially and literally take ideas from different places and put it together and understand how that affects us. Like even think the way that, and you and I spoke about this before, but looking at it from outside in, forget photography as a creative outlet. Think about it as a service. How is things like COVID at the present moment and being digitally ready going to affect creatives in the near future? How do businesses now think about photography? Because no one can do a photo shoot right now, right? There's no way that you're going to do a photo shoot. So businesses are now having to license images through stock photography because there's no other way to get the assets that they need. So they just have to just do to bear with and use what they have, and that's what they have available to them. So how does that affect their perception of what we do day in, day out? And how is that going to affect your business a year from now, 2, 3, 4, 5? So I start thinking in those instances. I don't think about the now. I think about what's happening 6 months from now, what's happening a year from now. And once you start looking outside in, you start changing the way that you adapt to different markets. I start thinking about, 3D rendering. How is that going to affect our business 10 years from now, right? How is that going to affect the commercial industry as a whole? How about the fact that there was a digital model on Instagram that had a whole page with millions of views that was selling product, and she wasn't even a real person. It was just literally somebody who created a 3D rendering of a person. I have a feeling that that's going to be the norm eventually, right? Because it's a lot less expensive to create her that way than it is to hire the model, license it, pay the photographer, do the whole photo shoot, when you can just do everything on a computer. How does that affect our business? So I start thinking in those capacities and then start figuring out ways that my business can shift with that market. That was a long answer, but
a very valuable answer nonetheless.
Absolutely.
appreciate
<clears throat> Excuse me. So you have migrated from being, as simplistic as it sounds, a photographer into somewhat of a project manager. You and I have talked about this in the past. You've certainly grown your business. Can you talk about first the etymology of how that grew and what it is you're doing today?
Yeah, so when I first started photography, believe it or not, I started shooting video financially long before I shot photos. So I would do behind the scenes videos for people. I would shoot tutorial videos for different people, like that was, and shoot and edit. And then I started shooting headshots, and that was fun for private clients. And then that started getting into the branding of what that looked like and personal branding. So if you photographed a lawyer, how is their perception in the market in their industry, and understanding what that meant to them. So not just thinking about a headshot in terms of you look pretty, this is for LinkedIn, and you look great, you're going to potentially get a job, but what's the impact of that image for that person's perceived persona and their business and their brand and who they are. That was important. And then growing from that into those people would hire me to shoot bits and pieces of their businesses. And then that evolving into effectively shooting just commercial campaigns at this point and building relationships with those people. So, you know, I've been lucky enough to have a giant butt. That sounds funny, but a giant butt and a pair of jeans featured in Times Square this year, which has been awesome. And I picked up my first camera 10 years ago. So that in itself it's humbling to think that in 10 years, I never thought that I would get there. And that was a personal life goal and dream of mine. The second I picked up a camera, to do that in 10 years was great. But a lot of that had to do with just building relationships, building connections, and just understanding business and what they're trying to do and align with those specific things.
So along the lines of those building connections and stuff, I mean, I totally agree and subscribe to that. I think that's how I get a lot of my clients as well. How is that kind of how your first client came about? Do you mind sharing who your first client was, or how that even evolved? Like, how did you get your first client?
It's a good question. So my first legitimate client was the worst experience I've ever had in my life. And then my first professional
You live
client,
and you learn. You live and learn.
You do. So I'm going to answer that question in two parts. Number one is my first client ever is not my first professional client, right? So the second I decided to make this a profession, that's a separate client altogether. Let's talk about the first person I ever charged money for photos though. Okay. So I was documenting my car, and I was getting the interior done at an upholstery shop. And one of the guys let me use the shop to do a couple test photo shoots there with some models, right? We've all done it. We've all like found a place, let me go shoot some models. And then they asked me to do a couple prints. I did the prints for the wall. And then one of their customers in this like weirdly customized Fiat or something like that, like this one-off Fiat that he had, hired me to shoot his car. Now, I didn't know what to price it. So I was like, give me $50. Let me preface this with, I'm far from that. Like $50 at this point in my life is not a line item on there, right? So I look at the guy and I go, $50. So I shoot it, and then it's like the weekend, right? So I was like, I'll have this done to you so I shot it Friday. I'll have it done to you by Monday. So now I have to go figure out where to get this thing printed. And I'm like traveling everywhere. By the way, I have a Dodge 1500 Ram at the time, Hemi. I live in New York City, right? I'm driving around New York City to figure out where am I going to print this thing. And I finally make it to like a Rite Aid or CVS somewhere down in the financial district in New York City that finally is able to print it out. And it costs $35 to print. Okay.
Wow.
I rode around all day, paid for parking, paid for tolls. I think I spent like $75 total to get this $35 print done, right? So I was at a deficit at that point. And when I gave it to him, he goes, "Oh, it's okay, thanks." Rolled it up, put it into the corner, and like left it there, right? Because it never got used. And I knew at that point, I was like, this is terrible, and I need to figure out exactly where I went wrong throughout this whole scenario. And to go from that to looking at it from a perspective of, you know what, this is a business, and if I need to charge as a business, I need to understand what my expenses were, what went into the work that went into that, all the effort that went into that. It's just not taking a photo, printing it, and giving it to somebody. It's all the effort that went in there, you know. And regardless, like, I think what hurt me the most in my ego was the lack of empathy that he had for all the work that went in there. I was like, I did all this work. And he's like, I don't care, because at the end of the day, I took a picture in his perspective, printed, and gave it to him. But he didn't realize all the extra effort that went in there. And then, so that was my first person that paid me $50. My first client as a professional photographer, I had just gotten laid off of my last corporate gig. And within 3 months, I knew I had 3 months of severance to do something with this specific this gig. So I ride Harley, and I knew that Harley Davidson was opening up a new shop in Soho, not too far. Like it effectively is just a showroom for their bikes, and I knew they were opening up this place. So what I realized is they were working on the interior design, they were working on everything else, but they didn't have the marketing set yet. Like they hadn't thought about who they were marketing to at that point. And I thought that was a really viable opportunity for someone to shoot the marketing, but I didn't have a video portfolio yet, right? Because they wanted to shoot, in my perspective, commercials. Harley shoots commercials. They don't just shoot ad campaigns. So I said, okay, I don't have the expertise and the portfolio to showcase that, but I have a project management background and I've managed people, right? So it can't be any harder than that. So let me find people, figure out what they charge to do a photo shoot or to do a video project or to do a commercial. If I aggregate that and I go back to Harley and realize Harley is franchised here in New York City and say, here's what I have in front of you. I would love to do this for you guys. Here's all the portfolio of the people that I want to work alongside. I'm the one managing it, directing it. Would you hire us? And they were like, we hadn't even thought about shooting that yet. Great. Hire us. And that's what within the first 3 months of losing my job, I shot a commercial for Harley Davidson, granted the franchise here in New York City, without a portfolio, just because I saw a viable opportunity in the market, and then project managed the whole thing.
That's really incredible.
Cool. Yeah.
And it wasn't for $50.
I sure hope not.
It sounds like you took not just a leap of faith in yourself, but in your ability to effectively manage a project of that size. I mean, not many people that have been photographing for just a short while would have taken on that kind of risk.
You know, but from what I've heard about what you guys do at the present moment and have done in the past, it's not different than what you did every single day, you know, for someone else. The difference is that you're putting the weight of the business on your own shoulders. So when you're PMing or you're project managing for your 9-to-5 job, it's easy because it's somebody else's risk. But when it's on your shoulders, it's this sense of incredible risk, because if you mess up, it's on you, you know, at the end of the day. But the weight's still there. Granted, look, the projects that I was working on for corporate America were 10 times what they were me doing for myself. Like that commercial at the end of the day is worth tens of thousands, whereas like I'm working on projects now worth millions of dollars, not with my business, even working in a corporate environment, worth tens of millions of dollars. What's a couple, you know, tens of thousand at that point? So I try to take the risk factor thought process off my head and just focus on somehow, some way this needs to get done. Let's make it happen. So I encourage every single person that's listening to something like this, or that wants to do something creative full time, realize that you do have 168 hours throughout the week. If you work 40 to 50, great. What other time are you allocating for your business and focusing on that? But also focusing on your strengths, doubling down on those, not so much focusing on your weaknesses, maybe outsourcing some of those weaknesses. As an example, I don't do retouching anymore. I will outsource that because it's not something I want to do. It's not practical versus time for me. I'd rather put my time in more valuable areas of my business, and also focusing on the impact of my strengths and where those things are. So all of that to say, project managing for me for a long time was one of my strengths. So let me go ahead and double down on that. And let me figure out where my weaknesses are, which is shooting, and figure out somebody that I can outsource that to in that same environment. All that makes sense.
It does, actually. So you'd probably consider yourself, at least these days, more of a businessman than photographer. Would that be accurate?
I'm a creative entrepreneur. And that's kind of where I go back to. You run a creative service business if you're a photographer. You're not just a person capturing an image. And if you are, that's not going to last very long in this market, right? It's not going to last forever. That's one of those things where you have to start thinking bigger picture. If you want to really sustain yourself as an artist, you have to start thinking about, who am I aligning with? Who am I doing things with? You have all these, and it's funny because this is completely off tangent, but on par at the same time. Do you think that Dwayne Johnson is the best actor in the world?
Of course not.
Realistically, but he got paid $160 million and was the highest paid actor last year out of anyone. And I ask you why.
I would love a good answer to that one, Jeff.
Personality.
I think he's made some great connections over the time. And
Connections, for sure. But all that has to do with what? He sells tickets and puts asses in seats.
Yeah.
It's all marketing at the end of the day. He's able to sell tickets. Whereas there are far better actors that can't do the same thing. Right?
So
what value does he bring to the table? And I think that that's what artists really need to understand. If you want to be a starving artist, you have to just continue doing what you're doing. If you want to be well and be well off, start thinking about the marketing aspect of the business side of the art that you're putting together. And I think that's what Dwayne Johnson did really well, which is, let me focus on the business side and the marketing side, because I know that my weakness may not be, I'm not the best actor in the world, but I can entertain people and I can sell tickets and I can put asses in seats. That's what really matters. So you as an artist have to think the same thing. You have to start thinking about, let me not think like a Broadway actor making $200 a day, and let me think like an actor that could potentially sell to large amounts of crowds and build this business so I can sell more people. And that's if you really want to sustain yourself. If you want to be in an apartment with 4 other people as roommates and live in your own little room and pay $500 a month and be a photographer and be happy, and that makes you happy, go after it. No one's arguing with you. But if you want to live on your own and you have other ambitions and things you want to do, and you want to travel and you want to not live off of your parents and you want to just be able to sustain yourself, then you really start having to think about your business as an actual business, not just the act of taking photos. And that goes back to the Dwayne Johnson conversation. $200 a day actor that's on Broadway, or somebody who made $160 million throughout the year. There's a fine line between the two. And I think you can't stay here if you have other ambitions in life. And frankly, I'm too old to be eating ramen noodles at this point in my life.
But ramen noodles are good, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm not.
All things being equal, you've put a lot of emphasis on marketing. Can you maybe shed a little bit of light on your marketing process and how you go about thinking about marketing?
Sure. So marketing is beyond SEO. And I know that's hard to hear for certain people that focus on SEO at the present moment. I'm very much proactive. I think about opportunities. I would rather knock on a door than wait, because I realize that this is a very saturated market. Look, we have 3 people here all competing for very similar businesses, right? Like if I wanted to shoot the headshot space in Philadelphia, or as an example, or if I wanted to shoot in Jersey, I want to shoot in New York, we're direct competitors at that point, right? I have to figure out ways to compete against everyone else in this market. It is incredibly oversaturated. So I very much am a proactive marketer. I don't sit back and wait for things. And one of the examples I give people is you driving around New Jersey and Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, all the places that you've gone to, you see a bad photograph of a lawyer, right? You've seen a ton of them. How often have you called that law firm to tell them that they have terrible images?
I honestly don't do that myself.
Yeah, me either.
Right? But there's an opportunity there. So how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are those people spending on marketing? and they have terrible photos, and you guys shoot better photos than that, right? You think that you can shoot better than that, so why aren't you calling don't call their baby ugly, but you can call them, I realize you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Here's what I've done for other clients, and I want to help you attract new business. Here's how I can make that happen. I didn't wait for a phone call for that. I don't wait for, XYZ person to call me. I saw an opportunity in the marketplace. Less and less people see those viable solutions to marketing. Marketing isn't just waiting around hoping for things. Marketing is you going out and saying, I exist at the end of the day. So I exist isn't just SEO, because SEO is one of those things that somebody has to search for a specific thing to know that you exist. Whereas I should be searching for customers. And in here, look, I'll give you a quick takeaway. If you're hungry for work right now more than ever, image is everything. It is. Like, at the end of the day, you don't want to do business with somebody unless, they look good. At the end of the day, like, image is everything. Dating, the person that you hire to clean your teeth, the person that you have as a surgeon, doctors, like, think of it like this. Like, you have a bad toothache. You call your doctor or your dentist and they're unavailable for a week. You gonna wait for that person? Hell no, because your tooth hurts. You're gonna go find another person. What are you gonna do? Like 95% of the other people, they're gonna go online and go find somebody, right? When you're looking at people to search through, even before ratings, do you pick people with photos first or without photos?
With.
Yeah.
And if that person looks sketchy as all hell, do you go to that person? Do you even click on their page?
Nope.
Doesn't matter how good their rating is, right? How does that affect that person's business if 100 people did that every single month?
Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely influential.
Right? So what's stopping you from right now, today, as an example, going on Yelp, looking at a 2-mile radius from you, aside from COVID, a 2-mile radius from you, and saying, you know what, I'm going to target all the specific people in a 2-mile radius that don't have a picture or have a terrible one. And I'm going to cold call them, letting them know that I exist. What happens if you land 10 of those and you're charging $1,000? That's 10 grand that you didn't have before, that you're not waiting around for because you decided to be proactive. That is your call script. And so if you mess up and you call them and you let them know, don't call their baby ugly, but just say, listen, my name is Jeff Rojas. I'm a commercial and editorial photographer based out of New York. And I noticed that you guys are doing a lot of advertising on Yelp at the present moment, but I don't notice any images that are on there. Who's in charge of marketing? I want to see how I can help you guys be successful with what you guys are trying to do. Because at the present moment, I don't think it's a good reflection on the business that you guys are trying to convey at the present moment. Who can I speak to?
That was exactly what I was going to ask you next. How would you go about approaching a company or a person that way? And so you just highlighted it.
And if you mess up, the cool part is, chances are they'll never remember that next week. They're not, because how many phone calls are they getting throughout the day or throughout the week?
Yeah.
It gives you a chance to call back. And if you mess up, dude, keep a list in front of you. Keep literally a call script and say, my name is Jeff Rojas. I'm a commercial and editorial. And like, you can keep that list in front of you, but practice it. And I think that's the thing that not many people really consider is like, you have options. Go reach out to these people. You have solutions. Go out, reach out to these people. There's always opportunity for work for us.
To that point, do you, you've been published in some really great places, editorial magazines and stuff. Do you do that for those clients as well? Do you reach out to editorial clients when you're looking to maybe work with a new magazine or something like that? Or
1,000%.
Okay, I didn't know if you worked with like some type of agency or something like that.
Nope. If you think about the way so if you look on most websites, even for like GQ, it'll say what the submission information is, but what's stopping you from going to LinkedIn to figure out who the photo editor is, to figure out who the editor is, and reach out to them to say, hey, listen, I shot this already. I would love to send it to you guys, and then say maybe no, but at least you built a relationship with that person. Or looking at all the different magazines that have submissions that you can submit to and do the same thing, make a proposal to them. Again, it's just like a business proposal. You're just proposing an idea that you want to create or that you've created already. It's no different than what you would do in a business environment.
So it sounds like you're doing plenty of phone work in the way of networking with people you don't know necessarily, and even reaching out on the internet, but do you ever visit with people in person networking wise?
So I tend to not try to spend too much time doing it in person any longer, because I feel like that was a waste of someone's time, right? That person. So for me in 2020, if I knock on somebody's door and they physically have to come over and they physically have to look at me in the face, a lot of times it's just, they feel agitated because it's taking them away from their day to day. So what I try to do is find ways that matter to them. So here's what I mean by that. Instagram is a really good way to make someone feel good without interrupting their day, right? So you post a new photo of your new hat and I go, awesome hat, and it made you feel good. Whereas if I knocked on your door that day and I was like, hey, awesome hat, I just interrupted your entire day, right? So like I try to find ways that people are trying to produce things. The point of that is it's about not asking to get, it's like dating, right? You don't go to somebody and say, hey, do you want to get married the first second you see them? That's creepy, right? But if you
Not to Richard.
Right? Don't look at me. I don't want to get married with you guys yet.
Right. You ask them out on a date, or you ask them to buy them a drink, whatever you like, to begin the conversation before you ever get to that point. The same thing happens with business. You have to build up that reputation. So find Instagram right now. If you look at Elle magazine, you want to shoot for Elle, and that's your life goal. I encourage you to look at Elle magazine right now on Instagram, look at their editorials, realize that in their editorials underneath, they have all the credits, clicking on all those people, following them, and spending the next month, 2 months, 3 months, building a relationship with that person, not DMing them, not just yet, but going through and as they post stuff, congratulations on that thing, or I love the way that you did this specific thing, right? You're building up a reputation with that person, a rapport with that person, long before you ask for something. We're all used to getting asked for things all the time, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world. Give me something of context long before we have that conversation. As an example, and this is being very open, we're friends, but at the same token, you have this really good, and I mean you, Richard, specifically, you have a really good way of making someone feel good, and then I feel guilty if I don't say yes.
Oh, thanks.
And
well, you know what? My mother taught me the Jewish guilt thing, so it's all good.
That's exactly what you made me feel good. So like it feels bad for me to say no, right? Because you've done all these different things for me. If I say no, I'm the asshole here. Right. So I try to do the same thing with my clients. It's that Jewish guilt that you're talking about. It's business guilt.
Well, first of all, let me say I never intended to guilt you into anything. No. But if you didn't do it, I'd be terribly upset. Really, we've built up a friendship over many years, and I never wanted to put you out over anything. So when this idea came up, you were honestly first of mind because you've always been so giving, right, with your knowledge, with your time. And I figure it might be a great opportunity for us to dive a little bit deeper into what makes you tick. So we're very grateful that you've decided to come on board here.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for your time, but above all else, and I just wanted to point out something here. You never asked me to do something before we had a relationship built together, right? And correct. I think that's the thing that most people need to understand. Look, every single day, and I can identify via email. I get at least 5 to 10 emails every single day with someone asking, can I be your assistant or can I be on set with you? No, I don't know who you are. I have no idea who you are. You haven't built any type of friendship or relationship with me. I have no idea who you are. Whereas, and this is a weird, awkward story, but at the same token, still pertinent. So there was this young lady who's a fashion photographer based out of the UK. And for 2 straight years, she would follow me and she would just randomly message me about, like, I'd post something. She's like, I love how you did this. Not how, just I love how you did this. And then January of this year, I was like, hey, I'm going to the UK. If anybody wants to hang out, I'll be there. And she goes, I would love to meet up with you. We've already built a rapport. It's not like she's a random person. At least she is to me. We just randomly met on Instagram online. But here's this random person that I was able to meet, but build a relationship at least with for 2 years. So we met up together. We had breakfast together. We ended up getting tattoos together, not the same tattoo. We wanted I convinced her to get a tattoo, by the way. She had never, she was like, I've always wanted a tattoo. And I was like, I'll make you a deal. I will take you and pay for it if you get the tattoo today. So for her mom and the discussion she had to have for her mother, she met a random dude on Instagram and got tattoos with him that day.
Wow.
So
That's incredible, first of all. Second of all, what's the tattoo? And
she got a rose.
are you even able to show it to us? Yeah.
No, mine's on my ribs. I got one, like a giant one on my ribs, but she has a small rose here. And it was sweet because at least we have that bond together. So for the rest of our lives, we have a good, like fairly good bond with one another.
Yeah.
So.
Well, just so you can check mine out, I went the whole distance and got a camera on my arm.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
That was a couple years ago. I'd been shooting some magazines, and I was like, okay, I want to get a little more ink. I have another tattoo, but I just was like, well, what's one more?
I like it. No, I'm literally covered. So
Nice.
Which we'll talk about in a minute. I'm sorry, I had to take a moment. Apparently a battery on the camera died. So
We kept the conversation going.
good. I am glad. It's not like you missed me too much. I love the fact that Jeff, as long as I've known him, has had tattoos. Personally, I don't have any. I've always dreamed of getting them. I feel like Jeff is going to change that for me at some point. But there's obviously meanings behind those tattoos, are there not?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So you over the years filled out an entire sleeve.
Mm-hmm. Both I have two half sleeves and two rib pieces. Yeah, it's been I think tattoos are the only thing that you can take with you when you die. Everything else they might go with you or not, like clothing even, right? So clothing, you might be wearing clothes or not, you never know, because at the end of the day, like those aren't things that you can't tattoos are one of those things that are attached. They're scars that you can choose, and so I chose mine very purposefully, but I let the artist do their own interpretation. So for example, I have a phoenix. That was my first one, and it was go big or go home. So it comes from here down to like halfway down my arm. And that was for not just rebirth, but always realizing that no matter how much and how far you fail, always to do better than you did before.
That's incredible.
Right?
Great. Yeah.
Because there are times in our life where, like, you know what, things are going to go to shit, but you have to learn from all the experiences that you've had up to that point and realize, you know what, I've learned all this already. I got to rebuild from the ground up. It's not so hard the second time as it is the first. And in business, that's no more pertinent than anything else. Like, I've had times where my business has completely failed, and then having to say, okay, I've already done this. This is easy. It's like building your first website. The first time you do it, it takes a week. The second time takes like 3 days. And after that, you're like, okay, 15 minutes, I got this, right? How much faster can I do it that third time? I think that tattoo symbolizes my person as a whole. I'm going to go through some crappy moments in my life, but I realize I need to get up and go do something. And that's probably the one that means the most to me at the present moment, just because I think it's one of those things that we forget as people. And it's something I have to look at in the mirror every single day. And to go off on a tangent, I'm like a 90-year-old grandfather. Fear to us is what stops us from doing things. Fear is what stops us from asking for opportunities. Fear is what stops us from doing anything. And so the analogy I usually give people, or the example I give people, is at some point you were a baby. At some point you had to learn how to walk. At some point you fell and you hurt your nose and you busted your lip as you were trying to walk. And you had some scrapes on your knees and your elbows as you fell to learn how to make those first couple of paces forward. But somehow you don't even think about it today. You're still walking. Right? You didn't let the fear of pain and failure stop you from walking today. But something between the time of walking and something between the time that you are right now, you let fear guide your life, and a lot of that stops you from doing things you want to otherwise do. So I think about life that way. I'm going to fail. I'm going to do things that aren't necessarily the best in my life, but I need to learn from those experiences, to grow from those experiences, to do better than I did before. Friendships, relationships, business, all of that combined, do better than you did before. So that one probably has the most meaning to me. All the other ones were drunk. I'm totally joking.
I think actually that tattoo that you're talking about actually really fits in well with what's going on today. Honestly, like it's a good reminder as you know, I think a lot of people are worried about losing their business right now, or what they're going to do with everything going on since they can't go out and shoot. You know, it's if you built it once, you can build it again after this is all over. I think that's a great point.
It's you learned how to do it once already. It can't be any more difficult the second time than it was the first.
Can you talk to me a little bit, or talk to us a little bit about failure? Because obviously that is a big portion of running a business, running even anything we try to achieve in life. There will be failure at some point. What was your biggest failure? How did you overcome it?
Yeah, so there was a time in my life that I found myself living back in a basement. And while that sounds pretty normal to most people at this point in this world, that was a shitty point in my life. And I say that openly because I had just left the relationship that I was in, and a business that I helped somebody else build. And they kind of took credit for all the business that they had together. And I stepped away from it. All the equipment, all the gear, all the opportunities. And that person was a little unhappy with me. So they burned a lot of bridges for me on top of that. So not only am I losing a partner, not only am I losing access to the equipment, but I'm also losing a lot of relationships because that person decided to burn bridges for me because they were unhappy with me personally. And that should never affect relationships. Relationships should never affect business, but unfortunately it did. So I had to learn how to stand up on my own 2 feet again. And I remember running away from that relationship, and I literally packed a couple boxes, ran back to my grandparents' basement in Queens and said, I can't do this anymore. And it's the one time in my life that I ran away from a problem. And frankly, I'm glad that I did, because I had to learn how to grow and put myself on my own 2 feet. So I moved back with my grandparents, and when I mentioned that there's no windows in the basement, there's legitimately no windows in that basement whatsoever. So there I am in a bedroom with a camera, a single lens, and my laptop, and have to figure out how to build up my business again, because I helped this person build her business, and for all intents and purposes, a large amount of my income comes from this business I helped build. So now I have to do this from scratch again. So here I am living in the basement. I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? Like, this is not a good place to be. And at that point, I had taught in front of tens of thousands of people. At that point, I had built something for myself. And now I'm back at zero again. So I had to figure out what to do. Within 6 months, I was back at 6 figures, which is great. And I remember when I was wearing a hoodie at the time, and I love hoodies. They're the best things in the world, ever since I was a kid. I put a hoodie on, and I was on my laptop. My grandfather had knocked on my door. He's like, hey, is everything okay? And at that point, I was making 6 figures for the year, right? So whatever that equated to every single month. So I was making 10 grand a month, whatever it was at minimum. And he comes over and he goes, why don't now that everything's going on, why don't you go get a real job? And I was like, huh? And he goes, yeah, why don't you go be a police officer or something? And I'm 26, 27 years old. And I'm like, and by the way, off subject, at one point I did sign up to be a police officer. Never happened, never wanted to do it. So I looked at him and I was like, I tried that once, not my thing. He goes, yeah, but why don't you do something stable? Mind you, he's an immigrant. That's what he knows. He worked for New York City Housing and Maintenance for 25 plus years. Stable to him is making 60 grand a year, working 9 to 5, traveling to work every single day. And I appreciate the effort and the commitment that he made to that, because I wouldn't be here today if he didn't make that. But for someone to come over to you and go, why don't you do something stable? And I was like, because I make a lot of money. And he goes, what do you mean? So I showed him the checks that I got. He's like, you make 6 figures and you live in my basement? And I was like, yeah. Why? And I was like, rent's cheap. And he's like, okay, fair enough, and walked away. I never made that in my life. In my basement. It was funny. But it was looking at that failure and having to build up from there. And then, after that, I left, and I'm glad. Look, I live in a high rise in New York City. I pay my own rent, which is nice. And that was 3 years ago. Like, it wasn't, you know, I live in one of the most populated or densely populated areas of New York City, in Manhattan, in a high-rise building. I'm incredibly grateful for what I have. But a lot of that had to do with, I'm not going to let fucking failures define who I am. And I don't think that we all need to make that happen. It goes back to that whole process of, I used to live on the Upper West Side in New York City, well-to-do, back to basement, and then here. And if this goes to shit, great. The next place is a mansion at this point. Like, that's kind of the goal here. What's the next like thing to build towards? Life's short.
It really is. That actually is a great segue into a couple of other questions.
Yeah.
The next one being, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? I mean, what do you see on the horizon, both for your business and personally?
So I made a commitment about 2 years ago to a couple of good friends of mine on a podcast, and I said I would hit the 7-figure mark in a single year by the time I turned 35, and that's still the track that I'm trying to work towards. Because my family doesn't have any millionaires at this point, right? So it's like, and coming from an immigrant family, for me, it's my responsibility to take all the effort that somebody else put and build off of that. So for me, it's not just a number, it's a goal, right? It's not, I'm going to go buy a Lamborghini. It's a goal for me to say, I hit this marker, and this is something, it's a point system. So here's the point system that I was able to hit. And then it's my kids, if I ever have children, my kids' responsibility to do better than that, right? And it's kind of building off of that. So it's where I want to be by the time I turn 35, which luckily is another 3 years. I have 3 years to build something at this point that generates that much income. Books wise, I've been struggling with repurposing Photographing Men and rebuilding it. I've already gone through that process once, where we had a contract on the table, and they effectively wanted me to just update it. And I was like, man, if I'm going to do something, I want to do something from scratch again. And I want to build off of what I learned before and do better than I did before, not make a couple of improvements, because I think that's a detriment to my brand and what I want to build. So going from scratch again, doing a book on creative entrepreneurship at some point, because that means something to me, to give back to others. And then personally, I would love to buy my first home, because New York City, I mean, look, for the space I'm in, you're talking about 3 to 5 million at this point. And like, I didn't grow up like that. So it's not like I can be like, Mom, Dad, can you buy me so it's making sure that all those ducks are in a row. And you know, personally, just finding the right person that wants to build a life together is a huge piece of life for me right now. Like, making sure that I have the right partnership, because I think once you have the right partnership in place, and I haven't had that in I haven't had that ever, actually, where you have the right person that's helping you build towards something, is incredibly important. I think it was, who was it? Warren, that winds up saying the most important investment that you can make in yourself and your business is who you're in a relationship with, because that person's either going to detract you or that person's either going to push you. And I think that's what I'm at the present moment interested in building over the next 5 years as well. Because without that, you're kind of just in a rat race, in a hamster wheel, right? Just completely moving forward. So finding the right person that helps you do better than you did yesterday and pushes you to turn your dreams into goals and do stuff with yourself. So those are kind of the things I'm focused on right now.
Sounds like you just put a call out for a date. I don't know. Guys, ladies, if you're interested, apparently Jeff is looking for a date.
That's important.
No, you're 100% right. I don't know where I'd be without my wife. I certainly don't know where I'd be without my parents. They've always pushed me. My wife is motivating for me. Mike, I think that's the same with you, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. My wife does public relations and marketing, so we are kind of in a similar field. So she is constantly helping my business, helping to push me in all that I do, and being that we're so in such a similar field, that it is a real big motivator for me, and I couldn't do it without her.
That's amazing.
So you talked a little bit, Jeff, about redoing books from scratch and redoing projects from scratch. Does the same type of principle apply to your photography? Are you going to reinvent your style over a period of time? Is that something you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where I'm at right now. And I've been doing some sketches and more or less what I want to do and what I want to build and things that matter to me. And because I feel like, especially in today's market, everyone kind of looks at somebody else and goes, "Oh, that's cool. I'm going to go do that." Right. But it's hard to like look back at yourself and realize what's important to you. Like, as an example, everyone started doing off-camera flash because they saw somebody do it on YouTube. And there's like 5 people that do the same exact lighting setup on YouTube over and over and over again. And I cannot tell their work apart. If you put the 5 of them together, I'm like, I have no idea who that is. Right. So I need to go back to the drawing board for me to realize what matters to me and start recreating like my personal work for myself. And like, I miss my black and white portraits that are gritty and grungy and things like that. And they don't resonate with everyone, but that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But going back to the drawing board to say, okay, that matters to me. Now, what am I going to do to elevate that? Is it going to be production? Is it going to be creative? Like, what more creativity? What's going to be different about this time? And going back to the drawing board. But I think it's incredibly valuable for you to recreate yourself every now and then, because it keeps things, instead of being so monotonous, it keeps you on your toes doing something different.
I think it's interesting.
Oh yeah,
Go
sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say, to that point, like you're talking earlier about getting inspiration from others and things like that. It was one of the first things we were talking about. But for your lighting and style, do you recall where you kind of got some of that like inspiration from, or is it just something? I mean, because for me, I look back and I don't know if you watched our first video, but like I kind of explained where. Like I figured out one day where the lighting style that I tend to like kind of came from when I was younger. I mean, do you have something you can point to and go, this is what inspires me to create something in this fashion? Or, you know what I mean?
So since I was a little kid, black and white has been my go-to artistic outlet. So as an example, if I bought frames for the walls, they would always be in black and white, right? If I was drawing it, it was either black paper with white chalk, or either black chalk on white paper or black pen on white paper. So that I tend to always have gone back to black and white. In terms of lighting, I think there was a lighting modifier that I invested in that really helped me study that modifier to realize I love this, and then move that around until I found something that mattered to me, and then kind of capitalized on that. And the first photograph that I think resonates with most people that I've shot is this guy who's drawn across the floor with like a 12 pack is the easiest way to describe it. But he's ripped guy. And that had to do with just me messing around with a modifier for the day, doing some studio styling where the background was a background that I had created. And then the floor was some panels that I had used for a wall at one point, and then throwing all that together and realized it just reminded me of sketching when I was a kid. And the lighting style was just me playing around with something that mattered to me. And then kind of working off of that. I wasn't studying too many people at the time. I just found something that was beholden to me. And then when I posted it, a ton of people liked it. And I was like, oh, I'm onto something, because it was validating to have other people, I would be remiss in lying if I said that me posting something and getting a ton of attention didn't feel good about what I created.
Sure.
I think I remember this image too, because I think I saw this at about 6 or 7 foot size at a Photo Plus. I think it was like a metal print. Mm-hmm. Is that the image?
Yeah, it was the exact same image. And it was only a couple of weeks after that. And it's funny because until I saw it that size, there was a lot of imperfections there and retouching. And I was like, yeah, this is why I'm going to outsource stuff from now on. Because like I shot it with 100 gigabyte camera at the time. 100 megapixel camera at the time. So when I shot it, you could see every single hair that man had on. It was weird. It was so odd to say.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so that's like one of your favorite images you remember. Is there any other images that stand out to you that you've done?
I mean, I think for me, it's always been like, what's the next one that we're creating? There's ones that I've created that people have liked. And there's other ones that, like, every photo that I've ever taken is just a moment in time. And it's a memory for a specific point in my life. So I attribute photographs not to the image themselves, but the specific point in my life where I was at that specific point. So even that image as an example, I remember I was pretty much done with my personal relationship at the time. And I remember her being in the office randomly at that point, talking to someone, and me like wishing she would just leave, and realizing like this is my sense of independence. And so that image I was able to shoot in 15 minutes. Like that guy literally came in and left within 25 minutes of being in the studio. It took me 15 minutes to take that shot and for him to leave. And then I remember a couple of days after that, I was single and left. Like I can remember everything. When I see that photo, I'm like, that was the day I decided this is not a good environment for me and I needed to leave. And I attribute that photo to change. So every photo has a specific point in time where I was like, oh, that photo meant this for this specific point.
That's incredible. I don't, in my work, I don't necessarily have that. However, what I do have is the ability to recall pretty much with about 99% certainty everything about my interaction with those particular people that I have photographed. Yeah. There are visible points in when my style got refined and when I've tweaked. Do you ever see that in your own work? I mean, obviously we're always improving, but do you ever connect with individuals for a period of time where you can look back and say, yeah, I remember what we talked about and I can see how my style has changed, etc.
Yeah, I mean, look, even so closest to, I think it was last year. Did I tell you about Jesus? Did we talk about Jesus?
We don't really talk about Jesus. Maybe we should talk about Jesus.
Okay, let's talk about Jesus. So I get a call. So I was shooting for this agency that called me to photograph this guy named Tyson. And he goes, this guy named Tyson, and he plays Jesus on this show on HBO. What was it? What's the show called? Preacher. Have you guys seen the show Preacher?
I can't say I have.
No, I haven't.
So it's one of those shows that like 1 in 20 people watch, if that makes any sense. So like, we want you to photograph this guy named Tyson on the show Preacher. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, why not? So I'm like, I get to photograph this B-list celebrity. And I'm being very candid with you guys because like, this is how I felt at the time. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? That was literally my answer. It wasn't like, oh, why not? Like, that was my answer, right? So and the reason that I got semi-excited was, and this is the only reason I got excited, on my Facebook group, I have my Facebook page, I'm friends with Santa Claus. Tom, and if you look at my Facebook friends, Tom is actually the Macy's Santa Claus that's been next to Jimmy Kimmel and all those different people. He is Santa Claus for all intents and purposes. He's what everyone identifies. He has a $3,000 velvet like Santa outfit and all of that. That's all he does every single year. Is he is the Santa Claus that you would recognize as Santa Claus. So I was like, I get Jesus and I get Santa Claus's friends on Facebook. Like, this is all I care about. Like, that's what it was. So I was like, why not? So I go teach a class. I'm 15 minutes late. I asked them if they wanted me to book a studio, and they were like, no, just do it in your apartment because we know you have a small, like, what's it called, little small setup there. And I was like, I live in 400 to 500 square feet, and you want me to do a whole photo shoot with a B-list celebrity there? Okay. And then I'm 15 minutes late, and this dude's sitting in my hallway, like waiting for me. And I was like, I'm so sorry for being late. And he goes, yeah, no worries, it's cool. So I go inside. The stylist is an hour late, right? The stylist who actually helped us book the whole shoot is an hour late. And this guy's like, he's chill. We're having fun. We're talking about life. And we're talking about traveling. And I was asking him about all the places he's traveled. He's like, oh, yeah, my band played a gig here. My band played a gig there. And I'm like, B-list celebrity, and he has these like small gigs here and there. That's awesome. But I didn't say that. There's a difference. I did not act, but I was like saying that internally. I was like, oh, it's cute. He plays in a band. So I shoot him. I shoot the shots. Everyone takes a photo. He buys this champagne, like this. He has his girlfriend go out and like buy this little bottle of like cheap champagne nearby. We all drink or whatever it was. And he leaves. My assistant goes, oh my God, I had such a crush on him growing up. And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, Tyson Ritter, All-American Rejects. And I was like,
oh boy. And that's when you know that Jeff was out of touch.
so, and I was like, I'm old. So then she goes, I had his photo on my wall for years. And she was like, I was freaking out the whole time. And I was like, I had no idea who this guy. And luckily, can you imagine if I was like, oh, it's cute, you play in a band. Who do you play with? And a couple days later, he's playing in front of like 10,000 people or something like that. Like something obnoxious.
Oh,
That's
man.
amazing.
The point of that is he uses my photo still till today. So if you look at his Instagram, that's my photo that I took. And to have somebody like that photo go so viral for his community was awesome. It was a validating experience, but it was also the day that I photographed Jesus and Tyson Ritter.
That's awesome. Well, there are clearly moments of demarcation throughout your life. These are just one moment, right? So what's the next moment?
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what the future holds. I wish I could predict that, but we'll see.
Yeah, but you create your own moments, don't you?
I try my best to influence the future, but I accept and embrace anything that comes my way. I just learn how to handle the situation as best as I can. You can't change anything, but you can adapt to those specific things.
It's amazing.
It's a great way. Yeah, it's a good way to live.
For sure. All right, obligatory questions. You ready?
I'm listening.
What camera gear are you using these days? What are you shooting? Lighting situation? Drink, and go.
That was a joke.
Well, I didn't see the Sony on there. Fantastic. So you're shooting Sony. Which Sony are you shooting?
Sony A7R III. So it's the camera that I have here. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're talking about 40 plus megapixel camera, getting a chance, like that's the camera that I used to shoot the billboard for Times Square. So it's not medium format, and it cost me $100,000. It was something that I was able to purchase under $4,000 right at the time. And it was a great steal for what it is, but also I'd been a Canon shooter for a long time, and I didn't see any major changes in that market. And I realized it was pretty stagnant for a long time. And the technology that this had behind it made it worthwhile, especially when you're shooting video, right? So things like the eye autofocus, the things like the speed at which things can be focused on, the assortment of lenses that they were using, and also the community that they were building behind it. Because I felt like anytime I would pick up a Canon camera, it was always a Nikon versus Canon debate, and people would just get into an argument. Whereas like I picked up a Sony and I found some interesting conversations with people. Like people would it was like this sense of community that I didn't have before. So it's almost like buying a Harley or a Jeep Wrangler in a way. Like you build up that sense of community together. And it sounds like such a weird reason to invest in a camera and a brand, but they're also investing back into the community because they're trying to take a huge market share by listening to what we're saying. How many camera companies were doing that at the time?
Not too many.
None.
So to have somebody listen to you as a consumer to say, you know what, we'll do better the next time. Especially, granted, yes, they're not doing it selfishly. They're not doing it selfishly. It's a very selfish intent. They're trying to build a business and sell cameras at the end of the day, but to do it listening to your consumer base, it's huge. So for me, to having a voice in the community and having a one-on-one relationship with a camera brand that's able to do that. So not only was I starting to shoot it because I loved it, but I also got a chance to work with them over the last couple of years. And that's been a great experience as well, to realize how invested they are in our community as well. Because there's not many people that, look, you go to a workshop, you still have to pay for the workshop. You still spend, $200-300. Whereas if you go to like a Sony event, a lot of them are free. And it's, they go pretty much balls to the walls. Here you go, anything you need, right? Whereas like, there's not many people investing into the community that way. Lighting wise, everything is still pro photo at the present moment, because I invested in gear from them quite a couple of years ago before all the third-party brands ended up coming out. We did a tour 7 years ago right now where we had pro photo lights, and they lasted 15,000 plus miles in an RV, trekking around the United States, getting used every other day and never broke on us. So getting a chance to use something in that capacity, and we had 35 different students in every single city, 33 different cities. It was a huge, so they didn't break. And I was like, these are a little workhorse. So I bought those. Those were an investment At the end of the day, they're very expensive lights to be able to purchase. Other gear, camera bag at the present moment, still using my Peak Design bag. It's very, very small. I prefer a minimalistic setup, so I try to just keep as less as I can, so I'm not carrying around too much. And then most of my other gear right now is just in storage in terms of what I use. I still have my gimbal and all the sliders and things like that I'll use for assignments, but I try to keep everything as minimal as I can.
That's awesome. Talk to me about post a little bit. You're still using Photoshop or the Adobe Suite?
Yeah, the Adobe Suite as a whole, because it integrates really well together, and I'm able to keep libraries of all my personal assets. So if I'm doing a video for YouTube, as an example, I have all my branding within that, so it keeps everything nice, clean, and optimized that way. And if I have a client, let's say like a clothing brand, I can keep their logos saved on a shared library with them and be able to grab those directly from Photoshop or Premiere or anything that I have. So it's a great integrated system. So,
are you, I knew that at one point you were endorsed by a great number of companies. Are you endorsed today?
By a few, but I just kind of took a year off of teaching just for personal reasons. I needed to just escape and just realize myself again and what I wanted. I was working, so Sony hired me to go out to Iceland to shoot some commercials for them. That was the last big project that I worked on. I think it was August of last year. We'll see what this year holds, especially with COVID and everything that's happening. I think that they're going to start re-looking at those. I've very honestly and openly, the only company that I'd be interested in working with at the present moment would be, I think, Sony, specifically because they touch different markets, not just for photography. I would love to expand my brand beyond photography into creative entrepreneurship, right? So it's all the rest of the things that I work on throughout the day that I don't really get a chance to talk about. So the less photography related gear that I can have that I'm beholden to, the more I can just be honest and open and not have to say, hey, I love this when I really hate it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Sure.
Well, you have literally covered a wide range of topics, Jeff. I mean, we've gotten certainly more for our money than ever before.
And so,
yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Jeff. I don't really know an adequate way to thank you for your time, for your knowledge, your friendship. So next time we're in New York, we're going to have dinner and drinks and all that other wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you kindly.
Okay, here we go. So, yeah, sorry about that. A brief pause because somehow or other there was a disconnection on my audio. Sorry, guys. So yes, the food and drink is on you, and I promise I won't make you pay too much.
Deal.
Okay, so guys, thanks so much for joining us. Jeff, thank you again. You've been an absolute pleasure for being on Behind the Lens. Mike, do you have any parting shots? Anything you'd like to ask Jeff as a follow-up?
I've got lots of other questions, but I'll save them for another time.
Listen, I'm here. I'm on your guys' time, so you let me know.
Oh no, I was thinking beyond photography, but I'll come up with Richard and we'll go out sometime when this is all over and we'll get dinner together and have some more candid conversations.
Sounds good.
For sure. So Jeff, before we wrap, can you please tell the folks where they can find you on the internet?
I'm sure YouTube, Facebook. I'm happy to leave you guys the links. Everything that I have is SAJORFFEJ, which is my name backwards. Until that dude dies that owns JeffRojas.com. That's what it'll be.
Fantastic. And we are going to leave links to Jeff's social media handles and his website in the description below. And as always, you can find Mike and I at richardwaine.com. And Mike, your website address?
It's mivillevisuals.com.
Again, those are going to be in the description below. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Jeff, again, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. You have an incredible day.